Chapter 494. The drunkard had ulterior motives. That was Secretary Liang's first reaction. But in front of so many elders, the CEO wouldn't reject it, right? Secretary Liang said it was only right. I swore to never touch any cases again. Qin Mo's voice was calm, but it was loud enough for everyone to hear. Wu Zhen paused, then smiled. I'll ask you again when you want to. Qin Mo didn't speak. Wu Zhen seemed to have discovered something. Brother Mo, why is your phone screen broken? Secretary Liang thought to himself, I fell in the car just now. It slipped and fell on the ground. Qin Mo turned his head, obviously not wanting to continue the conversation. Wu Zhen pulled a chair over and sat beside him, smiling at him. Secretary Liang didn't know why, but he felt that this was something young Master Jiu would do. I heard that the Qin group is having a masquerade ball today. I haven't participated in such an event in a long time. Brother Mo, can you give me a ticket? Qin Mo didn't speak. Old Master and laughed. Go if you want to. This kid won't bring you. Let Mr. Liang bring you in. Secretary Liang was the target of 3 pairs of eyes. He glanced at the CEO who was sipping on his tea as if it had nothing to do with him. He could only bite the bullet and reply, yes. Old Master and was trying to matchmake CEO Qin and Miss Wu, a blind date in disguise. When Qin Mo heard this, he put down his porcelain cup and stood up. I still have a meeting. It's not suitable for me to stay for long. Grandfather, I'll accompany you tomorrow. Old Master and understood the meaning behind his words. He knew that his grandson always had his own opinions. He thought the kid would have feelings for Zhen. After all, Zhen liked to follow him so much that even a rock would be moved. Why didn't his grandson feel the slightest bit of warmth? Wu Zhen's eyes dimmed after hearing Qin Mo's words. But after a while, she smiled again. For this person. She liked the police profession. She wasn't afraid of hardship or tiredness. Therefore, the rest really didn't count for much. But there was one thing. This person had to be hers. Wu Yan smiled wantonly. She turned around and said to Secretary Liang, Then I'll go and dress up first. Thank you, Mr. Liang. This. Secretary Liang looked at the side of his president's face and spat out 3 words with difficulty. No problem. When he got out of an family. Secretary Liang tried his best to explain. Boss Qin, in that situation, I really had to agree. It doesn't matter. Qin Mo was indifferent. Let her go if she wants to. Secretary Liang let out a sigh of relief. Only then did he realize that young master was unusually quiet today, especially when he looked out of the car window. It seemed like he was thinking about something. Moreover, he also knew that these matters were basically related to the 9th young master. The traffic jam in Rivertown started at 5 o'clock. After getting on the viaduct, Secretary Liang turned around and said, Young master, the business dinner tonight. Prepare a costume for the masquerade ball. Qin Mo interrupted him calmly. Order a set of military green female clothing and send it to the Fu family. No matter how heartless that fellow was. He didn't want his little brother to do something he didn't like in front of so many people. The female military uniform should at least be trousers. Yes. Secretary Liang had always been efficient. In less than half an hour, there was someone specially sent the military uniform to the Fu family. Chapter 495. Secretary Liang held the phone and looked at Qin Mo, who was still fixing his collar. CEO Qin. Forget it. Qin Mo had obviously heard the words on the other end. His long fingers paused, and his voice was a little low. Anyway, that guy has a girl he trusts to protect him. But did he really forget it? Secretary Liang always felt that when his CEO said these 2 words, he was not just a little bit cold. The sky outside finally darkened. Once night fell, it would be foggy. People often joked when they saw Jiangcheng, saying that living in Jiang City was like living in a fairyland. Fortunately, the masquerade party was held in a hotel in the middle of the snow. This place was in the suburbs of Jiang City. The air was a little better. Of course, it was only because of the air purifier and the existence of snow. Out of this place and on the national highway, few people would drive here. But today, it was very lively here. In addition to many good cars, there was also a Christmas tree as decoration. That Christmas tree was very big, and there were many lights hanging on it. In such a dark night, it looked especially beautiful. The atmosphere here was very similar to the Halloween party Fujio had in the Fifth Avenue. The British-style building was covered with vines, and it looked very grand. In addition, some people who came to the masquerade party were wearing ancient robes. With beautiful masks on their faces, it was hard to tell who was who. Occasionally, there were a few people dressed like vampire nobles, which made people feel that this was a castle in the demon world. The bustling place that never sleeps. Lin Feng came early in the morning. He finally washed away the shame of last year, and he wore a forensic suit that he thought looked very manly. A white coat, pure black trousers, and a mask. If it was someone else dressed like this, they would definitely look very ordinary. But Lin Feng didn't realize his aura. Dressing like this was really tempting to commit a crime. Yun, who wore a well-ironed military uniform and straight military boots. When he walked, he even had a strong and crisp sound. When these two people appeared, the fans who arranged for them to enter looked over. Look, the person cosplaying as a forensic doctor, it must be Lin Feng. I think so too. Is it a forensic doctor this year? What a tempting uniform. Lin Feng hadn't expected a fan to recognize him even though he was wearing a mask. He tilted his head and smiled at Yun Hu. See, sister? It's all because I'm too handsome. Yun Hu arched a brow but didn't say anything. Soon, the fan on the other end of the line continued. You can tell from her temperament, especially when she's standing next to Yunda. Receive? Receive. Lin Feng turned around. The girl who spoke, come over here. Let's have a good talk. I'm so manly, how can I take it? However, Lin Feng wouldn't be so petty as to talk to his fans about this. He was depressed. He had to vent his frustrations. He glanced at his childhood friend. Speaking of which, it was because Yun, who had been training since he was young, that he gave people the feeling that he was stronger. In fact, he was also very good at fighting. His abs were solid, but no matter how much he tanned, he couldn't get a good tan. How could he blame him? No, he had to find a sense of balance with Little Spade today. Chapter 496. As soon as Lin Feng's voice fell, a loud noise could be heard from the crowd. Some people's eyes seemed to be glued to the entrance of the hotel. A woman was coming from there. The long black chiffon dress accentuated her white lotus-like skin. Under the illumination of the light, she looked even more alluring. There was an opening under the black dress, and everyone could see the woman's slender and fair legs. At her ankle, there was a bright red rose blooming there. It made people want to look again and again. However, none of those could compare to the temperament this person gave off. His face was still covered by a mask, and only his thin lips were exposed, like lilac petals. The mask was also different from the others. It was surrounded by a bunch of pure black fur. Through the lustrous mask, people could only see a pair of black pupils. It was a deep and serene sea. Her black hair was like a cloud, hanging down in strands, half curling on both sides of her collarbone. On its head, there was a pair of devil ears made of black diamonds. Under the illumination of the light, it shone with an indescribable beauty. Especially when she raised her eyes, that kind of indifference brought about the temptation was the most charming. Who is she impersonating? You don't know him? Not a bad feeling. It's not just not bad. It's simply too beautiful. I almost stopped breathing just now. Is this also a fan? If it's a woman, she should be a fan. After all, Shui Yaoyao was the only girl in Supreme Alliance. The person in front of him was obviously taller than Shui Yaoyao. The most important thing was his aura. The kind of laziness that emanated from the inside out was really rare. They had never seen a girl more suited to the dark than the one in front of them. I really want to see what she looks like without her mask. When I saw her, I could only think of one word, witch. There must be a lot of people asking her to dance today. The sounds of discussion rang out one after another. He didn't notice that Shui Yaoyao, who was sitting in the corner, was shaking and clenching her fists when she saw that figure. He did not know why, but he was a little nervous. Highness Zhou. That must be Highness Zhou. That black gauze dress. Shui Yaoyao had seen it at the Fu family. He had even seen Fu Jiu in a thin veil. It was just a real disguise. She had just seen it. It was so beautiful. Black swan was the only adjective she could think of. Elegant, noble, bewitching. He could even feel the aura of the feather. It was just a pity Lin Feng didn't look over. He felt that his goal today was not to look at girls. Did the appearance of such a beautiful person have anything to do with him? What this masquerade party meant to him now was to find little Spade. On the other hand, Han Susu and her entourage, who had already arrived, sneered and took a sip of wine when they saw the figure who had captured everyone's attention. Just a little taller. Do these people have to be so exaggerated? In terms of looks, which one of us isn't prettier than her? It's all because of the mask. Who knows how ugly he'll look after taking it off? Yao Jia was the harshest among them, but she did not feel it. Furthermore, she felt that what she said was the truth. These people were just some small fans, and it was unclear what their family backgrounds were like. Those who know better should look at the ermine they wear, and the chains they wear on their wrists. The one who had just walked past, what did he have? All right, don't bother about her. Han Susu put down her wine glass. Help me save some of my idol. He is different from others. Even if he wears a mask, his presence will be very strong. Chapter 497. The night went on. The lights from the ball shone down. Fu Jiu just sat there lazily, holding a goblet in her hand. She swirled it gently, and there was a faint smile on her lips. She had said it before. She liked this feeling. It was very interesting to hide in the crowd and watch people look for you. But she used to hide from the police. But today, she didn't need to hide anymore. Because she saw Lin Feng walking towards Yao Yao. Lin Feng was indeed walking towards Shui Yao Yao. And he felt that his eyesight was very good, and he recognized her immediately. Yao Yao. His words came out of his mouth. Shui Yao Yao raised her eyes subconsciously. Fu Jiu held the side of her face and looked in the dark. She raised her pretty eyebrows. In the future, she would teach Yao Yao not to make a move when someone called her name. Hey, I found you. Lin Feng pulled Yun Hu and walked to the table in big strides. First, he glanced at Shui Yao Yao, and then he bent down and looked at the person sitting next to Shui Yao Yao. That person had messy silver hair, and he was wearing a pure black coat. Lin Feng closed the distance and continued to study. This should be Little Spade's style. Just when he was about to point at the person, a loud noise could be heard. No, it shouldn't be called a noise. It was the sound of people gasping. If Fu Jiu's appearance just now was amazing, then this person's appearance almost stunned the whole audience. There were many people who played the role of vampire aristocrats at the masquerade ball. But only he could be as cold and abstinent as a demon. Qin Mo. When people realized this name, not only the fans, but even the girls who were trying to get tickets were also screaming. Fu Jiu also looked towards the door. She saw the man standing there with his slender legs, looking casual and elegant. He was wearing a white shirt and a black cloak, and he was wearing a pair of boots. The gorgeous silver hair on the collar of the cloak instantly paled against his fair and handsome face. He was even wearing a pair of pure black gloves. The gloves seemed to have been custom-made for him. They wrapped around his slender fingers, making him look even more beautiful. There was a blood-red gemstone ring on his ring finger, which seemed to symbolize his identity as a vampire aristocrat. There were silver flowers on his black cuffs. Every part of it was dark and luxurious. When he turned to the side, his nose was straight and well-defined. Diamond fragments adorned the platinum mask on his face. His pure black hair fell down, making him look incomparably demonic. The young girls could no longer control their intense heartbeats and had already begun to scream. Almighty Qin! Almighty Qin! Almighty Qin! Listening to those voices, Yi Zichen felt a chill down his spine. Other than wanting to bring the Almighty home and raise him, Fu Jiu had another thought. It wasn't easy to be a golden man like the Almighty. Thinking about it carefully, there was no difference between the Almighty wearing a mask and not wearing a mask, and there was no joy in participating in a masquerade party. With that slender and straight figure and that domineering and indifferent aura, he would be recognized as soon as he appeared. Just as Fu Jiu was thinking about this, she saw that person's beautiful mountain-like back paused for a moment, as if he had sensed her gaze. Chapter 498. If Lin Feng hadn't stretched out his arm, Fujio would have been seen by Qin Mo. Captain, here we are here. Lin Feng's voice was very recognizable at certain times. Hearing that voice, Qin Mo turned his deep gaze over. Fujio had never been so thankful for Lin Feng's desperate gesture. She had to admit that the Almighty was really vigilant. She had only taken a photo, but he could actually sense it. Fortunately, besides Yao Yao, she also had brother Lin. In fact, the reason why Qin Mo looked away was not because of Lin Feng. It was because he also saw Shui Yao Yao. Lin Feng was still excited. He quickly stepped forward and shared his achievement. Captain, look, I found little spade. Qin Mo maintained his standing posture. He didn't sit down, but suddenly bent down. With his left hand on the table, he slowly moved closer to Shui Yao Yao's friend in that small space. That girl's face turned red immediately. Even through the mask, one could see how nervous her heart was beating. After all, when Yao Yao asked her to come, she never said that she would meet Almighty Qin. And Almighty Qin was really much more handsome than he was on TV. Especially when he was dressed like this. Unconsciously, that girl's eyes were filled with infatuation. She wanted this man to be closer to her. Just a little bit closer. However, at this moment, Qin Mo suddenly pulled back his hand, stood up straight again, and said in a very indifferent voice, "It's not that guy." Not Little Spade? Lin Feng didn't believe it. Impossible, Captain. Look at this guy's silver hair and coat. Qin Mo glanced at that girl again. The coat is that guy's, but the person isn't. Lin Feng was shocked, and his whole body froze. But Yao Yao is clearly here, and this guy's body shape. He did it on purpose for us to see. Qin Mo took out a glass of red wine, raised his head, and drank it in one gulp. But there was a hint of a smile that no one could see at the corner of his mouth. Lin Feng took out his phone and looked at the photo in the team's WeChat group. But there's no mistake. Little Spade must be here. Otherwise, why would he have a photo here? And he took a photo of you, Captain. Me? Qin Mo's phone screen was smashed by him. He didn't look at the messages in the group chat. When he heard Lin Feng's words, he reached out and snatched the phone over. He looked at his own photo, his eyes dimming. I can't take the photo from here. Really? Lin Feng looked at the photo for a long time, but he couldn't see anything special about it. How did the captain know about these things? Qin Mo didn't return the phone to him. Instead, he said calmly, if I were you, I would ask Shui Yao Yao more questions. Who knows, I might be able to get something out of her. Good idea. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. He didn't realize that this was just an excuse his captain had made up to take away his phone. Since it was already like this. Shui Yao Yao would never tell anyone about Fujio cross-dressing. Lin Feng would only be wasting his efforts. After sending Lin Feng away, Qin Mo walked to the opposite side and stood in the middle of the crowd. He seemed to be measuring something with his eyes. Chapter 499. That kind of unmoving expression. Like a demon, he was still holding a glass of red wine in his hand, but his eyes took in everything. Was that guy trying to play a game of cat and mouse? Qin Mo compared the photo on his phone. He picked it up to take a look and lifted his lids. The elegance of his actions attracted many onlookers. Han Susu walked over with her people, looking very happy. She took off her mask and smiled. Big brother Qin, it's me, Susu. Qin Mo's eyes dimmed because someone had been interrupted. Han Susu was only good at reading people's expressions and could not tell anything else. She extended her hand and pushed her friend out. This is Yao Jia. I didn't have the time to introduce her the last time. She's a Qin fan. Yao Jia blushed as she extended her hand to greet Qin Mo. The man put away his phone and said coldly, I'm busy. Only 3 words. Not one more. Yao Jia's hand froze in mid-air. However, she only felt awkward for a moment before she retracted her hand. However, his heart was somewhat gloomy. She had seen Almighty Qin go over to Shui Yao Yao's side just now and saw their attitudes. Even though Shui Yao Yao was from the Supreme Alliance. Wasn't she also a Qin fan? Almighty Qin didn't cherish his fans at all. However, Yao Jia did not think too much about it. The person she and Han Susu hated the most was Shui Yao Yao, that fat pig. There was one more. The woman who had stolen their limelight was sitting in the corner not far away. Today is really not going well for us. After returning to their card bag, Yao Jia grumbled heavily. One fat pig isn't enough. Now there's another one. Han Susu took out her phone and sent a few words over. Her eyes lit up. Don't be sad. Let me tell you something. I'm going to have a very good sister coming back later. If she comes, everyone will have to step aside. Which sister are you talking about? Yao Jia knew that Han Susu's background meant that her friends were either rich or of high status. Han Susu moved closer to her ear and whispered a name. What did you say, which? Han Susu reached out her hand to cover Yao Jia's mouth. Lower your voice. The only young lady of the Wu family? Yao Jia still couldn't calm down. I've seen her in her police uniform. She's so beautiful. She's my goddess. Han Susu laughed. She'll be here in a while. When that time comes, she won't be able to steal the limelight from our circle. Moreover, the Wu family and the Qin family have always been on good terms. Are you implying that the Qin and Wu families intend to? Yao Jia guessed. Han Susu pretended not to care and said, I'm not sure yet, but Sister Wu and Brother Qin have always had a good relationship, you know. Yao Jia nodded. Although she felt that it was a pity that Almighty Qin was likely taken this time. But now, compared to those, she was more willing to receive the attention of others. That was because there were already more than 8 people who wanted to invite the cross-dressing woman to dance with them. Even Shui Yao Yao, that fat pig, had somehow gotten lucky and was invited once. But no one was interested in them. To people like Yao Jia and Han Susu, this was no doubt a slap in the face. Therefore they had to get back at them. And at that moment, Qin Mo, who was standing right in front of them, suddenly stopped in his tracks. He pulled up the photo again and compared the angle. That pair of deep black eyes could not block out the resplendent light even through the mask. Chapter 500. On the other side, Fujiu didn't realize that the photo she sent to the group would reveal her whereabouts. After all, according to the rules, she had to send 3 photos to prove that she came to the scene dressed as a girl. One of them had to be sent after midnight, and her face had to be taken out of the picture. So Fujiu was quite serious about completing her task. After taking the first photo, she began to think about how to take the second one. At the same time, she was also wary of Qin Mo, who was shaking his wine glass in the crowd. But when that person suddenly turned around and looked at her without warning, Fujiu took a step back. It was so dark, Almighty Qin shouldn't be able to find her. However, that person continued to walk towards her step by step. She was in the dark, and the Almighty was in the light. She could clearly see the rubble on that platinum mask. She could even see that the corner of his mouth was slightly raised, and he was smiling like a ghost. It seemed to be there but not there. It entangled her heart, and it felt like she was being locked. At that moment, it was as if the surrounding dance music was silent. When that deep gaze fell on Fujiu, Fujiu was stunned. She even had the illusion that she couldn't breathe. Did the Almighty recognize her? Not likely. Half of her body was hidden in the dark. He shouldn't have recognized her. But how could she explain the tall and slender figure that was getting closer and closer to her? He was so close that she could even see the silver flowers on his cuffs and the custom-made black gloves. It was unrealistic to run away now. Could it be that she had really been recognized? Fujiu didn't move. She was still leaning on the sofa lazily, her long legs slightly exposed, and the smoke filled the air. This was the kind of calmness she needed. Even though she had a lot of thoughts in her mind, her expression was lazy and seductive, without a hint of panic. She even picked up the wine glass and took a sip of the red wine. Since she had decided to take a gamble, she would pretend until the end. The distance between the two of them was getting closer and closer. Fujiu felt like she was back in the Fifth Avenue. Being caught, and by the same person at that, was her biggest shortcoming since she entered the industry. As the man got closer, that thick scent floated over, bringing with it an invasiveness that had never existed before. Under the light, the man's eyes were like broken stars. It was as if nothing could hide from him. Finally, he walked in front of her. At this moment, Qin Mo saw the person sitting in the darkness clearly. No, It should be said that the first thing he saw was her long and slender legs. Her legs were very beautiful. They were as fair as jade and looked even more delicate in the dark night. In particular, she was wearing a pure black muslin dress, which made her legs look even more slender. There was also a blood-red rose at his ankle. It looked as if it had just bloomed, and it was as tender as a drop of water. The black dress didn't stay still. As it moved, it was even more beautiful than the lights. Below the slightly open collar was a beautiful and delicate collarbone, and below the collarbone was a woman's beautiful hook. That curve made Qin Mo's eyes darken a little. Moreover, as soon as he raised his head, he could see the other party's eyes. It was so black and clear that it even glistened with water. Fairy. These two words flashed across Qin Mo's mind. But in an instant, he clenched his fists. All the blood in his body seemed to heat up. Chapter 501. However, Fujio, who was being stared at by him, could only see that pair of eyes staring at her. They were dark like stone, flickering. It was probably because Qin Mo was here. So even the eyes behind him were full of astonishment. Especially Han Susu and her group, because they never thought that Almighty Qin would be by that woman's side. Shui Yaoyao looked at this scene, and her heart was in her throat. She couldn't help but stand up. The two of them were very close to each other. But one was sitting, and the other was standing. Did the Almighty recognize Highness Jiao? Shui Yaoyao was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. Fujio just looked away, as if she didn't know Qin Mo. She looked at the moment when the two of them brushed past each other. Shui Yaoyao held her breath. Every second passed extremely slowly, so slowly that even Fujio felt that it was not good to drag on any longer. Shui Yaoyao was afraid that Fujio would be recognized. While others were talking, she wished she could grow a pair of wings and fly over. Fortunately, Qin Mo didn't have any intention of stopping, and he didn't even turn his head. It was as if he walked over, not because of anyone, but simply because of this direction. Fujio was about to heave a sigh of relief after she moved away from that handsome and indifferent side profile. But she heard a familiar male voice behind her. Wait a minute. Fujio had no choice but to stop again. Shui Yaoyao's eyes began to shake. However, the man who caused the uneasiness of the others only slowly walked back. This time, Qin Mo stood directly in front of Fujio. After looking at her for a while, he suddenly bent down and looked into her eyes. At that moment, the handsome face under the mask suddenly enlarged, and the eyes that were as dark as the night seemed to be full of seduction. That kind of aura was very threatening. Even though there was a layer of cloth between them, the man's aura could still be felt. After the distance was shortened, the air pressure was lowered. That faint smell of tobacco lingered at the tip of her nose. This sudden close contact made Fujio instinctively take a step back, but she was still smiling. What's the matter? The calmer you are, the harder it is to be seen through. This is the basic principle of disguise. Qin Mo was still bent down with one hand in his pocket. He seemed to be smiling, and he said politely and indifferently, "Sorry, I got the wrong person." After saying these words, Qin Mo straightened his back, as though he had really recognized the wrong person. With his back straight, he continued walking in the original direction without any reluctance. At this moment, Fujio finally relaxed. Seeing that Shui Yaoyao was looking in her direction, she gave her a reassuring smile. It was indeed too dangerous just now. Fortunately, she was experienced. However, he couldn't stay in this place forever. The Almighty's eyes were too sharp. She was sitting here, dressed up like this, and the Almighty could actually tell that she looked like him? It was time to challenge the battle plan and prepare for guerrilla warfare. They had to wait until midnight to take another photo. They had to leave immediately. It would be midnight in an hour and a half. Fujio glanced at the clock hanging in the middle of the hotel, then walked to another corner to take a second photo. When it was sent to the group, our classmate Fujio had no idea. Her every move was seen by Almighty Qin. That was the hotel's surveillance room. This was the place Qin Mo had left for. The security guard in the surveillance room stood beside him and asked the man politely, "Boss Qin, are you only looking at this lady?" Chapter 502. As soon as Feng Yi heard that his almighty had gone to the hotel's surveillance room, he thought something had happened, so he hurried over. But when he arrived, Qin Mo had already pushed open the door and walked out. He was wearing black gloves, looking like a demon deacon. Feng Yi felt that there was danger no matter how he looked at it. He didn't know exactly what danger it was. He could only ask tentatively, "CEO Qin, I received a call saying that you wanted the hotel to help you change the surveillance of the ball. Has it been changed?" Qin Mo didn't say anything and just glanced sideways at him. That one glance made Feng Yi shut his mouth. He knew that he shouldn't ask what he shouldn't ask. Feng Yi had always been a qualified manager. Then let's go back to the ball now. It's going to be midnight in an hour. Even if you don't participate in the lights out event, you have to dance with the girl with the most invitations today. Originally, Feng Yi just said it casually to change the topic. Unexpectedly, Qin Mo said faintly, "I'll participate." "That's fine. Join. It wasn't surprising that Feng Yi was shocked. The lights out event was nothing else but kissing. For 3 years, no matter how many people there were, Almighty Qin had never participated in this event. What was going on this year? Feng Yi still had a dumbfounded expression on his face. On the other side, Qin Mo took out his phone. On the synchronized surveillance screen, a certain someone was still biting a French fry, looking at where to take the last photo. Even if the clarity wasn't high enough, the basic movements and expressions could be seen. Qin Mo looked at the certain someone walking back and forth on the screen. He pointed at the screen and spat out a few words with a smile. "Reckless kitten." Fujiu didn't know that she was being watched. Who would have thought that Almighty Qin would change the surveillance of the ball? That was why capitalists were evil. Mai Jiu was still seriously completing her task. She was bewitching all the way, rejecting no less than 20 invitations. Qin Mo took in everyone's invitation. If he hadn't confirmed it with the surveillance, perhaps even Qin Mo wouldn't have been sure that the woman in the black gauze dress and devil ears was that guy. He always thought that no matter how beautiful a guy was, he wouldn't feel comfortable in women's clothes. But Qin Mo's fingers brushed over the black swan-like figure on the screen. He thought of those watery eyes, and his gaze deepened. Han Susu, who was on the left side of the ball, felt more and more upset as she thought about what had just happened. She took out her phone and sent a WeChat message. "Sister Wu, why aren't you here yet?" "You don't know, but Big Brother Qin actually walked towards a girl just now. That girl must be feeling proud in her heart now. Come quickly and let her have a good look. She's nothing." Walking towards a girl. When Wu Zhen saw those words, her eyes narrowed. She floored the accelerator and stopped the car. Ignoring the security guards behind her, she tossed the keys behind her and strolled into the ball. Wu Zhen was indeed beautiful, and her dressing was different from other women. He was wearing a military uniform, long leather shoes, and a leather cap on his head. Her straight and slender legs were even more beautiful than those of a model. His waist was tightened by the black leather belt, which made him look very free and easy. She was also the only one not wearing a mask at the ball. Chapter 503. Sister Wu, here we are here. Han Susu waved her hand. Wu Zhen had the unique arrogance of the Wu family. When she lifted her chin, it was very beautiful. After seeing Han Susu and the rest, she smiled before walking over. "Who is this?" "I don't know. Probably not a fan." "Could it be that Wu family?" "Which one?" "It's the Wu family multinational corporation in our province. Your favorite superstar is from their family." "Damn, so rich." "To be honest, I don't care if I have money or not. I just want to know where my big spade is." "Me too." The person who spoke chuckled. "Maybe I'm old, so I don't have much interest in these things. But before I came, Turtle asked me to help her get a photo of Big Spade's mask, but I still don't know where he is." Some Spade fans were like that. But it didn't mean that others weren't tempted by Wu Zhen. She was referring to both men and women. Perhaps some people were like that. Once they knew that the other party was rich, they wanted to get closer to them. And being rich could even add points to some beauties. For example, if the person who came in without a mask and in a military uniform was someone other than Wu Zhen, they would say, "If you think you look good, don't wear a mask. Are you trying to attract attention? Just like when Fujio appeared just now. No matter how enchanting and beautiful she was, they would find reasons to be bad for her. Because Fujio didn't have the identity of young mistress of the Wu family. But Wu Zhen was different. The moment she sat down, Yao Jia and the rest gathered around her. Han Susu raised her eyebrows. Sister Wu, do you see the woman in the black chiffon dress sitting in the corner? She was the one who Brother Qin walked over to just now. Wu Zhen looked up and glanced over. They were all women, and they would always be wary of the presence of beautiful women. Her. Han Susu nodded. Let's wait and see. Wu Zhen smiled, but it wasn't very warm. There are bound to be many girls around him. I can't just take action every time there's a pretty girl. What about him? Of course, Han Susu knew who Wu Zhen was referring to. She was a little angry when she mentioned this. Big Brother Qin didn't even greet us. We don't know where he went from just now, but he's been staying with his team members. Wu Zhen smiled and was about to head in the direction Han Susu had mentioned. Someone came over and asked her to dance. Han Susu and the rest laughed. What were they talking about? As long as Big Sister Wu came, she would soon surpass that woman who had appeared out of nowhere. After Wu Zhen rejected the girl, Han Susu whispered into her ear, "The girl with the most invitations will have a chance to dance with Brother Qin. This is a benefit for Supreme Alliance fans." The benefits are so good? Wu Zhen arched a brow. It's not that he doesn't like dancing. Han Susu shrugged. Big Brother Qin has agreed to all of your 3 years abroad. After all, it's the company's arrangement. I understand. Wu Zhen's eyes flashed. Even though she had danced with Qin Mo before, she couldn't give such an opportunity to another woman, right? With this thought, Wu Zhen smiled again. I'll head over to take a look. It would have been fine if Wu Zhen hadn't moved, but now that she moved, she was heading towards Qin Mo. Chapter 504. Wu Zhen smiled, sitting beside Qin Mo as though there was no one else around. Lin Feng was still searching for traces of Little Spade with his pair of eyes. They really didn't expect that someone would suddenly sit on their side, and the expressions on their faces froze. The sounds of discussion rang out beside his ears. Everyone was curious. Does Miss Wu know Almighty Qin? It looks very familiar. I have a feeling that I'm going to break up. What heartbreak! It's obvious that I can't compete with Miss Wu. If this isn't heartbreak, then what is? You're really... The fans were basically a little disappointed, but this did not affect them from wishing their idol well. If Almighty Qin really liked her, they would silently support her. The commotion here was huge. Fujio, who was wearing a black muslin dress, only took a glance. After a quick glance, she continued to look for opportunities to take photos. However, he still had some ideas. After all, she had heard the Almighty talking on the phone. Last time in Tokyo, the beauty that the Almighty mentioned was the one today? Thinking of this, Fujio felt like she was being a busybody again. She curled her lips into a smile and glanced at the clock hanging in the hall. The most important thing now was to take pictures and leave when it was time. He didn't feel safe staying here. Qin Mo saw all of her actions. Because of this, his eyes gradually turned cold. That guy didn't seem to care who was sitting next to him. It seemed that sometimes you cared about others, but others might not necessarily care about you. Wu Zhen sat there, noticing that Qin Mo wasn't paying attention to her. She raised her eyebrows and glanced over, wanting to see what he was looking at. Qin Mo put his phone away before she did, his gaze indifferent. Wu Zhen didn't mind his attitude. Instead, she smiled and said, I heard that the girl with the most invitations can dance with Brother Mo. If I win, don't reject me. Qin Mo tilted his head and took out a cigarette from the pack, lighting it up. I won't reject the company's arrangements. You said it. Wu Zhen's smile deepened. Qin Mo's voice was faint, polite and distant. We'll talk after you win. That's easy. Although I'm late, I have other ways. With that said, Wu Zhen walked towards Fujio. Hi. The first thing he did was greet them. It was this greeting that made Fujio move her gaze away from the clock and look at the person in front of her. Up until now, everything Wu Zhen had obtained had been earned through hard work. Ever since she got to know him, she knew what she needed. Moreover, Wu Zhan had always felt that it was only a matter of time before they got together. Even when she went abroad to participate in some special training, it was also because of him. No woman in the world was more suitable for Qin Mo than her. She was the only one who had seen how that person looked when he solved the case, and it was completely different from now. Wu Zhan knew very well what kind of girl that person admired. Therefore, she did things neatly and said whatever was on her mind. However, Wu Zhan was the only daughter of the Wu family. She had never considered that her behavior was, after all, sudden. Chapter 505. Fu Jiu didn't know what opportunity she would get if she received the most invitations. She had been thinking about disguising herself, completing the photo mission, and guarding against the Almighty. How could she have noticed such gossip? When Wu Zhan made the request, Fu Jiu didn't reply immediately. Instead, she quietly waited for the other party to continue. The reason was simple. She didn't like the other party's attitude. Wu Zhan didn't expect someone to not give her face. She smiled lightly and continued, "Miss, do you have any doubts?" Fu Jiu looked at her, leaning against the glass countertop. She raised her hand to get a glass of red wine and said lazily, "No." Wu Zhan narrowed her eyes, suddenly feeling that the woman in front of her wasn't easy to deal with. But she wasn't here to cause trouble. She was only here for an opportunity. Naturally, she wouldn't show any unhappiness. "Since that's the case, state your conditions." Fu Jiu took a sip of red wine and smiled lightly. "Attitude." "What?" Wu Zhan didn't understand. Fu Jiu smiled, her eyes revealing darkness under the mask. "I thought that if you want something from me, you should at least have a better attitude and not be overbearing." Hearing that, Wu Zhan clenched her fingers, then tilted her head and smiled lightly. "Looks like I have to explain. Because of my profession, I'm used to wearing a police uniform, so my style of doing things has naturally become like this. It's rare for me and Brother Mo to have a chance to dance together. Can you please let me have it?" Fu Jiu's fingers paused. If it was such a chance. Of course, she had to let him have it. Otherwise, she would be the one dancing with the Almighty. Letting her have it would be a reason to escape. Giving it to her was a reason to escape. Fu Jiu's lips curved slightly. Just after saying sure, Qin Mo walked over, his gaze sweeping across the room, making one feel extremely cold. "Sure? Looks like someone really needs a lesson." Fu Jiu looked at that emotionless side profile, and her body involuntarily retreated. Maintaining a safe distance was the first choice. Qin Mo still looked nonchalant, but the knuckles of the fingers hidden under the black gloves were a little white. He didn't speak to Fu Jiu, as though he didn't know her. Instead, he turned his head and said to Wu Zhan, "Don't break Supreme Alliance's rules." Just a few indifferent words. Wu Zhan's pupils trembled as though she had received a huge blow. But very quickly she smiled again. "I was just asking this lady. Since Brother Mo isn't happy, forget it." Everyone watched from afar. They couldn't tell who Qin Mo was more willing to dance with. But in the end, according to the rules, the demoness won. Manager Feng stood outside the crowd, thinking, stop fooling around. When has the Almighty ever followed the rules? In the past 3 years, which year did he stay from the beginning to the end? He only showed his face and left. This year was special to begin with. What was even more special was that Almighty Qin was actually going to participate in the Lights Out plan. Didn't that mean that he would have to kiss his dance partner? F***ck. Why did he feel that his Almighty treated that witch differently? Qin Mo didn't leave after he finished speaking. He still stood in front of Fu Jiu. Chapter 506. Mr. Just as Fu Jiu started to speak, the bell on the other side began to ring. Dang! Everyone knew what it meant. It was 15 minutes to midnight. The melodious waltz played on time. Fu Jiu looked at the man standing in front of her. He reached out his black-gloved hand and said indifferently, "Give it to me." "Give what to me?" Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. "Hand." That voice seemed to despise her for being stupid. Fujiu still didn't move. She was thinking of ways to reject this dance. How could she dance just like that? Qin Mo's deep eyes looked at that fluffy head. There was no emotion on his face, but his eyes were dark. Based on his understanding of a certain someone, she must be thinking of how to escape. What a pity. At this point, she still wasn't willing to dance with him. How could she let a certain someone escape so easily? Just as Fujiu's eyes were still drifting, her left wrist was suddenly grabbed by someone. Because of this action, it wasn't within her expectations. Fujiu's whole body leaned forward uncontrollably, and the tip of her nose bumped into Qin Mo's chest. The faint smell of tobacco on the man filled her mouth and nose. It was quiet and cold, and it smelled familiar. The people behind him, whether it was Wu Zhen or the members of the Supreme Alliance, couldn't hide the shock on their faces. They probably thought that Qin Mo shouldn't have been so focused. Only Fujiu didn't feel anything. That was because an emotionless male voice rang in her ears. Stand properly. These two words were very much like the Almighty's usual style. So, the Almighty shouldn't have known it was her until now. However, the two of them were too close to each other. Every time she moved, the man's tobacco smell would follow, and Fujiu had nowhere to hide. Fujiu could clearly see the high bridge of his nose and the irresistible allure of his sexy thin lips. He was looking down at her. That pair of beautiful eyes under the mask was like a deep well, indifferent and noble. She wanted to pull her hand back, but he had already started to lead her to dance. Fujiu knew that it would be too pretentious to shake off the Almighty's hand. She thought that as long as they didn't stick together, they wouldn't be discovered. Shui Yaoyao, the only person in the know, was speechless after seeing this scene. He looked at the two people on the dance floor. There was only one thought in her mind, and that was that they were a good match. Whether it was his height, temperament, or that indescribable feeling. Because Almighty Qin was a person with an indifferent temperament and was full of nobility, it was destined that no matter who stood beside him, they would pale in comparison. But for someone like Highness Jiu, he wouldn't. The fairy-like black swan danced in Almighty Qin's arms, but it didn't make people feel inferior. On the contrary, it made her even more bewitching and devilish. The two men looked like they came from the darkness. Even their outfits complemented each other. It was as if they had always been in this world. Gradually, Wu Zhen's gaze darkened. The money in her hand was almost deformed from her grip. The surrounding scenery was constantly changing because of the dancing steps. The lights in the ball were dim, so Fujiu could only see Qin Mo's eyes flickering. She couldn't even see the reactions of the people around her. The number of people on the dance floor began to increase. Chapter 507. When the lights dimmed, her sense of touch became more sensitive. The man's unique breath blew on Fujiu's neck, making her move uncomfortably. Fujiu had never danced such a melancholy dance before. She was afraid that the two of them would touch. But even with such a distance between their chests, Fujiu could clearly feel the warmth from Qin Mo's body. Her black dress was made of gauze, and one of the Almighty's hands was on her waist. Then, along with the rhythm of the dance, they touched again and again. For a moment, there was an indescribable numbness in her tailbone. However, at this moment, the man lowered his eyes and leaned his thin lips against her ear. His voice sounded emotionless. Don't lose your balance, understand? Fujiu finally witnessed how cold the Almighty was when he treated girls. But at this moment, she had better not speak. What if she opened her mouth and attracted the Almighty's attention? Anyway, the dance had started. She might as well finish the dance like this. Then she could retreat. The reason why Fujiu had this idea was that she didn't expect that Lin Feng would still be looking for her even though it was almost midnight. His voice drifted into her ears. I bet little Spade is nearby. He sent a photo just now. At midnight, he will take another photo. Let's watch who will raise their phones. Fujiu heard that and laughed in her heart. Brother Lin, you don't have to raise your phone to take a photo. Plus, I won't take it at midnight. Later, when everyone was counting down, she would turn on the camera function of her phone and delay the photo by 10 seconds. But when she thought about this, Fujiu didn't know about the Midnight Lights Out event. After all, she was a newcomer in the Supreme Alliance. It was her first year attending the New Year's Eve party, so it was normal that she didn't know. In fact, Shui Yaoyao didn't know either because she didn't ask around. Plus, her attention was on Fu Jiu. She could tell that she was worried about Fu Jiu. But because of this worry, the hand on her waist tightened after being noticed by Qin Mo. Fu Jiu naturally didn't know what was going on with the Almighty. She just looked at the man's cold eyes. She could only sense his impatience. It seemed that the Almighty really didn't like girls. However, this was also a good thing for her. Since the Almighty didn't want to break the rules, he definitely wanted it to end sooner than she did. At that time, once she left, she would no longer have to suffer this kind of mental torture. She had to constantly be on guard against being discovered. It was too tiring. Compared to wearing men's clothing, it was even more tiring. Is dancing with me boring? The man's deep and graceful voice slowly sounded. Fu Jiu couldn't speak, so she could only shake her head. She thought to herself, Almighty, you are the one who looks bored. Don't worry, it will be over soon. With her eyes lowered, Fu Jiu didn't notice how dark Qin Mo's eyes were when he said that. And Manager Feng, who knew the inside story, really couldn't sit still. She looked at the clock again and again, and looked at the two eye-catching people on the dance floor again and again. When the host came over and told him that there were only 3 minutes left until midnight, he was about to pass the microphone to him. Feng Yi was completely nervous. Every year went by like this. It was just a lights-out event at midnight. Why was he so different today? It must be the Almighty's influence. Chapter 508. 2 minutes. 1.5 minutes. 1 minute. 30 seconds. When Feng Yi took the microphone from the MC, the music stopped. Everyone stopped dancing and looked in Feng Yi's direction. Their eyes were filled with excitement. There are 25 seconds until the new year. At midnight, the lights will go out. Is everyone ready? Feng Yi had been in the industry for a long time. Even though he was in a complicated mood, his smile was still elegant, like a successful man. Ready! They answered in unison. Even Coco, who didn't dance, joined in the fun with a big white rabbit in his arms. He had already decided that if he didn't have anyone to kiss, he would kiss his rabbit. Lin Feng was the most miserable one. This year, he finally didn't have to dress up as a girl and could invite someone to dance. But when he realized that it was midnight, he realized that he had been with Little Spade the entire time. Yunhu was the only one left. Was he supposed to kiss Yunhu? Some fans noticed his side glance, and Yunhu lowered his head at the same time. In an instant, pink bubbles filled the air. Fu Jiu and Shui Yaoyao didn't know what was going on, but they exchanged glances through the crowd. Fu Jiu was glad that the Almighty let go of her waist, so she could free her hand to take the third photo with her phone. 10. Feng Yi held the microphone and started counting down with bright eyes. Soon people followed. 9. 8. 7. When Fu Jiu was at the Fifth Avenue, she had participated in a group New Year celebration. That atmosphere was different from her own New Year celebration. Everyone seemed to be very happy. When one person's happiness was shared with another, it would become 2 parts of happiness. When so many people were happy, it would spread a kind of excitement. So Fu Jiu didn't realize that there was something wrong. Until the countdown reached 4, Feng Yi suddenly said, "Everyone, don't kiss the wrong person." Kiss the wrong person? What did he mean? Fu Jiu sensed something and raised her eyebrows. Wu Zhen's face turned pale instantly. She asked Han Susu in a low voice, "What did Feng Yi mean by don't kiss the wrong person?" At midnight, everyone has to kiss their dance partner. Han Susu studied Wu Zhen's expression. This seems to be the Supreme Alliance's tradition. Kissing my dance partner? Wu Zhen was annoyed. Why didn't you tell me something so important earlier? Sister Wu, don't worry. Big brother Qin never participates in this game. He'll be back when the countdown ends. It wasn't Han Susu's first time participating, so she knew the process very well. She wasn't the only one who thought this way. All of the team members had the same thought. Hence, no one paid attention to Qin Mo. Only Fu Jiu instinctively wanted to retreat after hearing the news. But it was still too late. She had just taken a step forward. The 0 in Feng Yi's mouth dropped abruptly. Fu Jiu could only feel her wrist being pulled back. The lights were instantly extinguished, replaced by countless candles that mixed with the starlight and fell into the wooden window. The flickering candlelight was faintly discernible, swaying slowly in circles like a human pulse. Brother Emo, it's... Fujio hadn't finished her eye. Chapter 509. Just like that, he kissed the person in front of him as if there was no one else around. When the unexpected breath was imprinted on Fujio's lips, it was as cold as snow. There was only a blank in her head. There was a faint smell of tobacco. He didn't give her any chance to resist. It should be said that she didn't expect Qin Mo to kiss her, because according to his habits in the past, he should have come back. But at that moment, everyone froze. Everyone's expression was indescribable. Fujio wanted to use her usual fighting skills to resist, but the man was one step ahead of her. He pressed her wrist and held the back of her head with his other hand. His tall figure leaned forward and deepened the strength of the kiss. Even Qin Mo himself didn't know that he just wanted to teach someone a lesson. But after seeing those watery eyes, he couldn't help but kiss her. That taste. He was fascinated by it. It was sweet, soft, and emitted a faint fragrance. It was almost impossible to resist the urge to have more. Fujio wanted to resist, but he pressed her against the long dining table. He forced Fujio's lips and teeth open with his tongue. It was like a hurricane that swept away the sweetness with the taste of candy. Men were naturally aggressive, not to mention men who were drunk. In some aspects, Fujio was a novice. It was the first time she was kissed like this. Her heartbeat seemed to be disrupted, and there was no order to it. Not to mention, the numbness from the friction between their skin was like a lightning bolt, piercing through her tailbone. The sky was dark. It seemed like Fujio couldn't hear anything. Or like all the sounds were amplified. Especially the screams around. It was almost deafening. But the clearest sound was the man's heartbeat. It was deep and powerful, as if it could pull away all the noise. Even Fujio herself didn't know how that kiss ended. But when she wanted to open her mouth and bite him, the man had let go of her, and there was no light in his eyes. There was even an indescribable feeling. But that feeling only lasted for a moment. In the next second, he became that unapproachable almighty Qin again. His aura was cold, like a jade prince. Fujio didn't make herself look pathetic. Instead, those thin lips that were exposed outside the mask became even more irresistible after being kissed. Qin Mo just looked at her. The two of them stared at each other. The scene was very beautiful. In an instant, the people went from screaming to an unprecedented silence. Lin Feng was so shocked that he couldn't close his mouth. The captain. He actually took the initiative to kiss a woman? Yunhu's eyes widened in shock as well. More importantly, he was wondering who the witch was. On the other side, Han Susu's eyes widened. None of them dared to look at Wu Zhen. Even from where they stood, they could feel the indignation emanating from Wu Zhen. That unwillingness seemed to have drained all the blood from Wu Zhen's face. She looked at the scene in disbelief, her fingers tightening bit by bit. Shui Yaoyao, the only one who knew, covered her mouth. Almighty Qin. Almighty Qin actually kissed Highness Jiao. Fujio narrowed her eyes, wiped her lips with the back of her hand, and decided to leave immediately. Chapter 510. After saying that, he just looked at her quietly. It was as if he wouldn't let her go if she didn't tell him the truth. Fujio suddenly felt a little depressed. But her wrist was still held in his hand. There were many people here, and it was very inconvenient for her to move in her black dress. Did you call me Brother Mo? At this point, the man suddenly stopped talking and raised his hand to grab her hair. Fujio knew he was suspicious, so she raised her hand to protect herself. Her expression became even more depressed. To avoid being exposed in public, she decided to strike first. Okay, that's right, it's me, Fujio. This is a wig. Qin Mo looked at her lowered fluffy head and curled up his thin lips outside the mask. He pretended to be surprised. Why didn't you say it was you earlier? Fujio wiped her mouth with the back of her hand again. I wanted to say it, but you moved so fast that I lost my first kiss. First kiss? Qin Mo raised his eyebrows. Lord Jiu is experienced in confessing. How could it be your first kiss? Fu Jiu. Was it appropriate for the Almighty to bring up a confession at this time? And why did he call her Lord Jiu? She was depressed. Qin Mo looked at the redder lips of the person in front of him. He moved his fingers to stop the man's movement. His eyes were a little heavy, but his voice was indifferent. It was just a kiss. Do you have to wipe it? Fu Jiu didn't want to wipe it, but she could still feel the faint smell of tobacco. It was all because of the Almighty's strong presence. Even if you want to wipe it when you get home. Lin Feng is here and he has been looking for you for a long time. Do you want to say hello to him before leaving? Ha! Fu Jiu knew the Almighty very well. He wanted to negotiate with her. Brother Mo, help me. I'll cook porridge for you next time your stomach hurts. Fu Jiu really didn't want Lin Feng to see her like this. If Lin Feng knew, everyone would know. The main thing was that she and the Almighty had just kissed, so they would definitely attack her. How could the Almighty be so nonchalant? Sure enough, she wasn't as thick-skinned as the Almighty. I don't lack porridge. Qin Mo tangled his fingers in her hair and thought for a moment. Same as before. Fu Jiu looked at Lin Feng who was getting closer and closer. Same as before? What were the conditions before? Could it be that this guy had never taken his words to heart? Qin Mo narrowed his eyes dangerously, then laughed coldly. No puppy love, stay away from girls and boys, don't flirt with anyone you see. I don't have a girl or a boy, Fu Jiu retorted. Qin Mo's voice was calm. Shui Yao Yao, you guys are too close. The team doesn't allow relationships between members. It will affect the competition. So it was this. Fu Jiu was just about to say something when she saw Lin Feng looking over suspiciously. She turned sideways and smiled lightly. Brother Mo, we can talk about this later. I have to retreat now. Cover me. Qin Mo's eyes flashed. He agreed, but he had an additional condition. Do you know the side door of the hotel? Wait for me there. Fu Jiu. You want me to wait in this dress? Agree first. We'll talk about it later. Unfortunately, Qin Mo lowered his head again. He bent down and whispered in her ear, You're not allowed to leave with anyone. If I don't find you later, you should know the consequences. No one knew what they were talking about. Chapter 5:11. There was only one thought in Fu Jiu's mind. The Almighty was indeed not easy to deal with. Fortunately, judging from his expression, he wouldn't think of her as a girl for the time being. Before Qin Mo blocked Lin Feng, he glanced at Fu Jiu again. The warning in his eyes was very obvious. Lin Feng was still tiptoeing as he watched. He wanted to see who was so charming that his captain actually kissed him. He was stopped by the captain just like that. Lin Feng stuttered. Captain, just now why did you? Qin Mo was very calm. The company arranged it. It must be Feng Yi's idea. Therefore, whether it was Lin Feng or Yun Hu, they all looked toward Manager Feng. Feng Yi opened his mouth, thinking that the company only allowed you to invite dances. Did they allow you to kiss? He wouldn't take the blame for this, not at all. But Lin Feng wasn't stupid. Every year, the captain wouldn't agree to the company's arrangement. Why did he agree to it this year? Qin Mo also knew what he wanted to say. He raised his hand to look at the watch on his wrist. He put one hand in his pocket and looked very indifferent. It's 3 minutes past midnight. I have to go back. If you have any questions, you can ask Feng Yi directly. As the manager of the Qin Club, he should know how to deal with this kind of situation. He will tell you everything you want to know. When Qin Mo said this, he looked at Feng Yi. Manager Feng was speechless. After being reminded by the Almighty, he realized that there were still a lot of fans here. Especially when there were a lot of fans. An Almighty like Qin Mo would definitely think of a lot of unexpected things. One thing happened. It was originally very simple. But when the fans saw it, it wouldn't be simple anymore. For example, who was that woman? Why did Almighty Qin kiss her? And so on and so forth. So, Feng Yi's eyes turned, and he revealed his most gentle smile. It was indeed arranged by the company, as a fan benefit to give back to everyone. In fact, There had always been benefits. It was just that the Almighty never cooperated with some that crossed his bottom line. Why did he do it this time? Would he kiss someone? Looking at the back of that tall figure leaving. It wasn't only Feng Yi who thought so. Wu Zhen had the same idea. When she saw that scene, her body was almost swaying. Something changed in his heart. She had been begging for so many years, but she had not gotten it. If that woman just now could give the opportunity to her, would the one who was kissed become her? Even if he didn't, at the very least, it would not be like this. Wu Zhen really couldn't understand why she was attending this masquerade party. She couldn't understand why she had done so much. Why didn't that person respond to her? Sister Wu. Han Susu looked at her worriedly. Wu Zhen didn't reply. Han Susu only felt that the other party's gaze was very scary. But in the next second, Wu Zhen chuckled lightly. So playing games is more of a sacrifice than being a police officer. For the sake of the company, you have to sacrifice your kiss. When Han Susu heard this, she immediately said, if it wasn't for the welfare, Big Brother Qin wouldn't even touch them. Chapter 5:12. Feng Yi didn't do everything well this time. Since it's a club, it's only through the fans' financial resources that Supreme Alliance can develop. Wu Zhen thought that perhaps it was because of this reason that some people without the most basic upbringing were able to sneak in. Han Susu sneered. I don't know what you're thinking. Didn't you say spending money isn't important? What's more important is the support. When they say these words, Lin Feng stood beside the two of them. When he heard the last sentence, he glanced up, his expression indifferent. You really don't understand. In this world, there are always things more important than money. You mean you don't love money? Han Susu wasn't a stranger to Lin Feng. Then why is the Lin family still in business? Lin Feng smiled like a cherry blossom. My career has never conflicted with my beliefs. I don't know why you don't understand that feeling. Nothing is more important than the people by your side when you thought you couldn't walk out of it. Because I've fallen before, I know better than anyone else. When everyone says Supreme Alliance might not be able to make it, those who are more worried about Supreme Alliance's results than me, those who use their meager but powerful strength to support us forward, those who come to watch us compete even if they have to eat instant noodles, those who spend all their pocket money just to buy a ticket, telling us that even if Supreme Alliance isn't as strong as before, they won't leave. Those who are more determined than us that Supreme Alliance will definitely win the National League. Shouldn't we invite them the most? Lin Feng's words caused the entire place to sink into silence. Yin Wuyao held the cigarette in his mouth, breaking into a smile. Yes, shouldn't they be the ones we should invite the most? He had never been so thankful that he was back. Except for the little captain. Everyone had their own bottom line and principles. This was Supreme Alliance. Han Susu was at a loss for words. Wu Zhen's gaze was heavy. Not because of anything else. Instead, some people were already looking over at them. Even though no one said anything. Someone immediately posted Lin Feng's words on the official Weibo account. There were only a few words in the title. I have never regretted being your fan. In fact, after Feng Yi saw that official Weibo post, his vague worries were dispelled. He couldn't guarantee that no one would take a video of Qin Mo kissing her. If it was filmed, that would definitely cause a stir on the internet. This was obviously disadvantageous to Supreme Alliance. Even if there was no video, as long as someone said so, the media would grab hold of the topic and keep expanding it. Now that Lin Feng had spoken the truth, all the dangers had been resolved. Nothing was more powerful than a true love powder. They were always silent. Be there when you need me most. Hence, Lin Feng's post was reposted many times that day. But there was one thing. Almighty Qin was really not right this time. Feng Yi was curious and worried. However, who was the woman kissed by Almighty Qin? Why couldn't he find out which fan she was? He was the one who personally sent out the invitations. Unless that person was. Chapter 5:13. Feng Yi was frightened by his own thoughts. And he was terrified. First, he took a deep breath and told himself to calm down. Don't always let your imagination run wild. Maybe it was just someone who sneaked in. Bullshit. Feng Yi had hired a professional to investigate in order to avoid harassment from the media. That was why people without an invitation couldn't enter. But if it was a fan, he or she would have his or her online nickname and dress characteristics. He or she would have to submit the form first before being allowed to attend. But there was no record of that person. And this year, the team member was going to dress as a girl. Little Spade. Feng Yi's fingers paused. Then he thought it wouldn't be strange if it was Little Spade. Almighty Qin had always been indulgent towards Little Spade. No, that wasn't right. What did he mean by it wouldn't be strange if it was Little Spade? They were two men. Feng Shang saw that his brother seemed to be a little dizzy and thought he had drunk too much, so he came over to help him. Brother, what's wrong with you? Feng Shang, listen to me. Don't dress as a girl in the future, understand? Feng Yi's face was serious. Baby Feng was stunned and immediately said, I am a manly man, I won't dress as a girl. Your idol is more manly than you, but he still wore it. After wearing it, he was kissed by Almighty Qin. Wait a minute, when Almighty Qin said he was going back, he was simply helping Little Spade out of trouble, right? After thinking it through, everything seemed to be like a thread, inextricably linked together. Including why Almighty Qin appeared in the hotel surveillance room, Feng Yi suddenly understood everything. He probably locked onto Little Spade and confirmed it. In other words, after watching the video and confirming who Little Spade was. That was why Almighty Qin agreed to participate in the Lights Out event at midnight this time? Feng Yi's eyes changed when he thought of this. It was fine if it was a CP. But, if Almighty Qin was really gay. Feng Yi could almost imagine the chaos that would ensue after others knew this secret. Not only Little Spade, but even Almighty Qin would be defeated by those who said they liked him. It wasn't because they did anything wrong. Even if Almighty Qin was the young master of the Qin group, he would be forced to give up the esports industry in the face of the storm of the internet. So today's matter. He couldn't say. Feng Yi finally understood why Almighty Qin reminded him before he left. As the manager of Supreme Alliance, he would keep this secret to himself forever, burying it in his heart. But Almighty Qin and Little Spade. What was going on between them? Were they really going to be together? I won't. This was Qin Mo's reply. No one knew that when he walked to the side door of the hotel, his emotions were churning in the depths of his eyes. He was straight. There was no doubt about it. Because he had no interest in having the same body as himself. However, he didn't understand why he couldn't control himself at that moment. In fact, she even wanted more. That was why he had the youth wait for him here. It was to confirm it again. Tell the guy to put his clothes back on. Let's confirm it again. Fujio was still wearing that black chiffon dress, but this time she was smoking. Since there was no one around, she decided to take off her mask as well. Holding the cigarette between her fingers, she lowered her head and smoked. In the midst of the smoke, her half-closed eyes were faintly discernible, as if her facial features had been kissed by God. Chapter 5:14. Qin Mo's eyes dimmed when he saw this. He strolled over, took out his hand from his trouser pocket, took Fujio's cigarette, and put it on his thin lips. Fujio looked up and smiled. Look at me, I'm so obedient. You don't have a car, right? Qin Mo held the car key and said calmly, You can drive later. Put on the mask first. The reason why he said this was because when he looked at this face, Qin Mo had a feeling that he wanted to destroy something. Fujio clenched her fingers and smiled. No, I'm underage. Underage can climb over walls but not drive. Qin Mo raised his eyebrows. Fujio sighed. Brother Mo, you can't keep poking at my wounds just because you kissed me wrongly. I said it was me, but you didn't listen and kissed me. Fujio thought about it just now. The Almighty was a straight man, and he couldn't accept this kind of thing. After all, the Almighty didn't recognize her at that time. After hearing Fujio's words, Qin Mo reached out his hand and flicked that guy's head. He said calmly, You're too slow. It's just a kiss. It's nothing. Fujio hooked up her lips. If you feel uncomfortable, you can find a girl to kiss. Hearing this, Qin Mo's eyes dimmed completely. This time, he didn't say anything. After turning around, he said to Fujio, "Let's go." That voice sounded like it was mixed with fog, and there was an undetectable loneliness in it. At that moment, Fujio thought she heard it wrong. How could that person be lonely? She paused, then paced to catch up. Qin Mo seemed to be suppressing something. After opening the door, he took out a bottle of water, opened the cap, and took a sip. Then he closed it again and threw it into the car casually. "Get in." This was Qin Mo's second sentence. There was still some distance from the dance party to the city center. The main thing was that it wasn't easy to walk at night in Rivertown. The haze was so thick that visibility was very low. Fujio didn't know if the Almighty felt that he had kissed a boy, so he couldn't accept it and was preparing himself mentally. But at this moment, no one seemed to have the time to care about the fact that Qin Mo had drunk and was driving. Because Qin Mo's indifference was so obvious. As a result, when Fujio wiped her lips again, he suddenly opened his mouth and warned, "Wipe it again. Do you believe that Big Brother will teach you again what it means to kiss?" Fujio tilted her head, looked at that handsome and noble face, and thought that he really couldn't accept it. But it was her fault if she rubbed it. If the Almighty hadn't bitten her so hard, her upper lip wouldn't be so numb and swollen. She listened to a certain someone muttering to herself. Qin Mo's eyes warmed up a little. But when it warmed up to a certain extent, his deep gaze landed on the upper lip that someone was talking about. Then, it slowly moved downwards, revealing a beautiful curve. Of course, Fujio noticed his gaze. Her heart skipped a beat. However, there was a faint smile on his face. "Do you feel that you're very real? If Lin Feng hadn't given me these disguises, I didn't know how many people would have recognized me." Qin Mo didn't speak. He slowly narrowed his eyes, and there was an indescribable danger. But at this moment, Chapter 5:15. Under his palms, the delicate softness could be felt even through a layer of cloth, with a faint fragrance of warm jade. Qin Mo's body paused, his Adam's apple moved, and he glanced to the side. But he couldn't control himself. Because of this softness, all the heat in his body rushed into one place. That feeling was crazy. But a certain guy was still smiling, evil and handsome. Touch it and see if it feels good. It's so realistic that it can fool some otakus. If Qin Mo had had a woman, he definitely wouldn't be so passive. But Fujio was betting on the Almighty's long-term indifference to women. He wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a real and a fake one. Any man would know that. What did Qin Mo feel at that moment? He stopped the car by the side of the road, and when he glanced over, he saw that person raising her eyebrows at him with a light smile. Her thin lips were slightly red, and her eyes were watery. She was no different from a vixen walking in the night. Qin Mo didn't think and pinched Fujio's chin. He lowered his face and his eyes deepened. "If you don't want to be pressed under me right now, be good." Fujio paused. Her fingers stopped Qin Mo's movement. But the man's wrist was hard and strong. She felt like she was holding a piece of hot iron, hard and burning. Her heart skipped a beat. Qin Mo looked at her expression and took his hand back. His voice was as calm as water. "Get out of the car if you do such a perverted thing again." "You didn't notice?" Fujio curled her lips. She knew when to stop. But this time, the sacrifice was a little too big. Not only did she lose her first kiss, but she also had to take the initiative to let the Almighty *CK her. Now, in the Almighty's mind, she was probably a person with no morals. So, it wasn't good to have too much dark history. For example, if she provoked the Almighty again, the Almighty would definitely throw her out of the window, a source of pollution. She had already driven out. The Almighty had already tolerated her to a certain extent. In the end, it was all because of that lights-out operation at midnight. A kiss that shouldn't have happened. When the Almighty saw her in the future, would he remember that he kissed a boy and want to get even with her? Then she would lose all her advantages as a younger brother. Speaking of which, why did the Almighty care so much about that kiss? Could it be? Fujio looked up. "Brother Mo, don't tell me that was also your first kiss. Even if he wasn't close to women, he should at least kiss a girl during puberty. After all, the Almighty looked like a man with endless peach blossoms. If he stood there, There would definitely be girls wanting to kiss him. For example, Christmas Eve or Valentine's Day. But the facts proved that. The man's cold gaze confirmed Fujio's thoughts. No, Brother Mo, what did you do in school? Could it be that top students were destined to be different from slackers like them who only read books and never fell in love? The Almighty didn't seem like such an obedient person. Also, the last time she saw the Almighty fight with the second middle students, he looked like a boss. In addition, Fujio had visited number 1 middle school's Tiaba before. There were still remnants of the Almighty's achievements when he was the school hunk of number 1 middle school. It was said that he was the boss of the area. Even the second high school would take a detour when they saw him. Did such a person really have a first kiss? Chapter 5:16. Fujio. She just wanted to know when the Almighty would get over the fact that he had kissed a boy by mistake, and stop mentioning her dark history. But Fujio didn't know what Qin Mo was thinking at this moment. The fog outside the car was still thick. Qin Mo's hand that was turning the steering wheel still felt that soft, jade-like touch. He couldn't concentrate at all. He wanted to press that guy under his body, and he even wanted to do it. Qin Mo's fingers tightened, and the speed of the car was affected. Someone who was willing to let him do it with her couldn't be a girl. But he never thought that he would have such thoughts about a boy one day. He suddenly realized that his palm was addicted to that feeling. Warm and soft. It passed through the clothes to his hand, like some kind of temptation. Qin Mo's Adam's apple moved imperceptibly. He parked the pure black Hummer on the side of the road. The Fu family's villa was just ahead. Change back into your clothes. These short words made Fujio pause again. Here. There's only you and me in the car, you can't see from the outside. As Qin Mo said this, he lowered his head and took out a cigarette. Then he tilted his head and lit it up. He leaned against the steering wheel and raised his eyebrows slightly. Fujio chuckled calmly. I didn't bring any clothes. Brother Mo, take them off and give them to me? There's a set of casual clothes I brought behind you. Qin Mo's voice was very calm. Fujio's fingers paused. No need to be so troublesome. It's just in front. Change back. Qin Mo took a drag of his cigarette, and his handsome face was vaguely visible under the flashing headlights. He chuckled again. You were just acting like a hooligan. What are you afraid of? Fujio didn't move. She just said lazily, I don't want to change. Then you can get out of the car whenever you want to change. Qin Mo held the cigarette between his fingers and extinguished it. He locked all the car doors and smoked casually, looking noble and abstinent. Fujio knew that the Almighty always did what he said. She really couldn't wear this with the Almighty all the time. It was a short time, and it was at night. If it was in the daytime, even if she acted like a hooligan just now, the Almighty wouldn't have all his doubts. Therefore, he couldn't stay here any longer. The Almighty must have been angry at her because he had kissed the wrong boy just now. That was why he had asked her to change. However, even if he could do it in the car, he couldn't do it in the front seat. Taking advantage of the fact that there were no cars passing by and nothing could be seen in the car, she jumped into the back seat and put on a pair of long pants and a sweater. As long as she was fast enough, it should be fine. Fujio looked up. Qin Mo spoke up, his voice calm. Do you need to think for so long just to change your clothes? So he hadn't completely eliminated his suspicions about her? Fujio raised her eyebrows and unbuckled her seatbelt. Using her left hand as a support, she twisted her body, bent over, and jumped into the back seat handsomely. The interior of the Hummer was spacious, so Fujio didn't feel any pressure when she did these movements. Instead, she looked very cool. She picked up the garment bag and pulled out a pair of trousers, then a sweater. Under the complete darkness, the rustling of the cloth would seem especially loud. Fujio changed clothes 3 to 4 times faster than ordinary people. It was because she was good at pretending. Chapter 5:17. There were only the two of them in the Hummer. This feeling made his throat a little dry. He wanted to relax. With a cigarette between his fingers, he tried his best not to look behind him, especially at the sound of clothes rubbing against each other. Instead, he tilted his head back slightly and looked at the haze outside the car. For some reason, the scene of this guy cross-dressing at the ball appeared in front of his eyes again. White legs, beautiful collarbones, and a pair of watery eyes. Qin Mo didn't want to think too much, so he simply looked back. He just happened to see the youngster's waist. That white, smooth, and curvature from trying to put on a sweater was breathtaking. An uncontrollable thought came out of Qin Mo's chest, drowning all the feelings he knew. An indescribable heat rose from his lower abdomen, and that heat spread to every muscle. Even the hand that was holding the cigarette paused heavily. At that moment, he even wanted to let the youngster sit on his lap without wearing anything. Or, he wanted to take off all his clothes in the car and teach him a lesson. He wanted to teach him a lesson until his watery eyes were really watery. The clearer the thought, the more uncontrollable the turbulence. In the chaos, Qin Mo was very clear that his desire was different from that of any ordinary person. Because ordinary people wouldn't have such a strong desire for a boy who had the same body structure as them. Qin Mo closed his eyes heavily. When he opened them again, it was already quiet. When Fu Jiu turned around, she found that the other party was staring at her. That kind of concentrated gaze made Fu Jiu's heart tighten. She tried to control her breathing and curled up the corner of her mouth. Did the Almighty find out? That was the worst-case scenario. But even so, Fu Jiu liked to bide her time. A Mercedes flashed by outside the Hummer, and the headlights shone in. The two of them stared at each other in silence. She didn't know how long it had been. Fu Jiu heard that pleasant and indifferent male voice say, "I'll send you back." "Okay." Fu Jiu smiled slowly. That meant that he didn't find out. But it was impossible. She changed her clothes very quickly. Plus, the visibility in the car was very low. The Almighty didn't turn on the interior lights, and there was a haze outside. Even if he did, he could only look at the back. At the end of the day, the Almighty wasn't in a good mood because he was unhappy that he kissed a boy. Fu Jiu understood. After all, the Almighty was a straight man, so he must be very conflicted. It was one thing to respect everyone's sexual orientation, but if the Almighty was involved, he would definitely feel uncomfortable. What's more, that was the Almighty's first kiss. In the Almighty's heart, she was undoubtedly the culprit. Fu Jiu felt that she had to explain this matter. "Brother Mo, when your female confidant asked me to dance with you, I really wanted to give her the chance to dance with you. Although she didn't like that person's attitude. But at that time, all she wanted to do was hide from the Almighty." But Fu Jiu didn't know that after her explanation, Qin Mo's gaze turned colder. He unlocked the car on the right. "We've reached your house, get out." At this moment, Fu Jiu also noticed Qin Mo's unhappiness. Perhaps today was indeed not a suitable day for the two of them to chat. After Fu Jiu went down, he sped up. Chapter 5:18. Fu Jiu looked at the Hummer disappearing into the night and rubbed her sweater with her fingers. She hoped that the Almighty would return to normal when they met tomorrow. Otherwise, it would be too depressing to attend this masquerade party. After leaving the Fu family, Qin Mo didn't go home directly. Instead, he stepped on the accelerator and sped all the way to a place he wasn't keen on before. Pure Color. A famous nightclub. The panoramic glass building was overflowing with color and was extremely luxurious. There were countless luxury cars slowly entering the city. Especially on a day like today. However, no car could compare to a military Hummer with a red and white license plate. It smoothly stopped in front of the gate. When people saw the license plate, they were immediately shocked. One of the reception managers quickly called their boss Jiang. But Boss Jiang seemed to be in a bad mood these days. This was especially true after his birthday. Could it be that Boss Qin was here to drink with Boss Jiang? The reception manager could only think so. Qin Mo got out of the car with a pair of slender and strong legs. The other girls who got out of the car couldn't help but look in his direction. He was still wearing the clothes from the masquerade party. The lines of the devil's uniform outlined his perfect waistline. His chestnut black hair slightly covered his eyes, making it hard to see his expression. However, it was this abstinence and noble temperament that made people forget to go home. Gosh, who is he? He's so handsome. You don't even know him? That young Master Qin of Jiang City. Why haven't I seen him before? Young Master Qin. Of course you haven't seen him before. He doesn't come often. Today is a feast for your eyes and luck with women. The girls looked at each other and smiled. Then they walked in. It was like this in the nightclub. Everyone could talk to each other and treat each other to drinks. Even some girls, if they liked someone and had money, would ask the waiter to give them a dozen drinks. So, the nightclub was a place that didn't create distance. It was also a place where Ong Nightstand was flourishing. After all, they were all adults. They were very attracted to this kind of hormone attraction. But no one knew when it started. But there were many high school students in the nightclub. Perhaps this was the change of times. Because some high school students were richer than adults, they knew how to squander and enjoy themselves. Qin Mo's looks were lethal to anyone, let alone girls who were experiencing their first awakening of love. Seeing Pure Color's manager leading the way personally, some of the young ladies' eyes lit up even more. On this day, some of the girls who came to Pure Color were looking for opportunities to interact with Qin Mo. One of the girls couldn't take it anymore. She came from a rich family. She drank the wine and smiled lightly. If you guys aren't going, I will. Someone like Qin Mo should be more proactive. Are you crazy? The girl's friend held her back. However, the girl didn't think much of it. I'm not bad looking, you idiot. No man can push away a woman who tries to get close to him. What are you worried about? Did you know that a while ago, someone tried to drug young Master Qin, but nothing was done. In the end, he never appeared in Pure Color again. Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't go. The Qin family was, after all, a warlord. No matter how handsome and elegant Qin Mo was, he was ruthless. Chapter 519. The girl smiled, not taking it seriously. I'm not going to drug you, I'm just going to express my feelings. I'm still young and have some fun, understand? Maybe I'll sleep with you. Seeing that he couldn't stop her, the friend kept quiet. Some things didn't make sense because of their different views. That girl was indeed beautiful and looked very pure. She should not be old. Sometimes, men like this type of girl. This gave the girl a high level of confidence. Her face was still flushed. She stood in front of Qin Mo and smiled. The way she squinted her eyes made her look like a cat. Qin Mo looked at her, his gaze a little dazed. Seeing this, the girl grabbed Qin Mo's collar, probably wanting to kiss him. After all, from young Master Qin's gaze, it was obvious that he wanted something. What she didn't expect was that the other party didn't even give her a chance to get close to him. He directly took a step back. The girl paused for a moment, and a layer of tears appeared in her eyes. Qin Mo didn't have any intention of stopping, he said to the person beside him. Get rid of her. Yes. The manager in charge of reception was really helpless. These people knew young Master Qin didn't like it. Why did they do it? The girl felt wronged. She didn't do anything. She rushed over and hugged Qin Mo's waist. Young Master Qin, I was wrong. Give me a chance, I just like you. The same softness pressed against his back. But he didn't feel any impulse. There was even an indescribable sense of disgust. This time, Qin Mo didn't maintain his most basic etiquette, his eyes turning cold as he said two words, scram. Young Master Qin. The girl's beautiful eyes were filled with tears. She didn't believe that a man could be so cold-blooded. But Qin Mo was just that cold-blooded. Even when he glanced at the reception manager, his gaze was cold. The manager knew he had been careless and hurriedly asked the bodyguards to throw him out. So when Jiangzhou appeared, the first sentence he said was to tease Qin Mo. These beauties, they can't act coquettishly to anyone, but they have to act coquettishly to a person without emotions and desires like you. Qin Mo didn't say anything. He took the red wine, pulled out the cork and poured it into the wine glass beside him. Then he lifted his head. He finished the glass. His side profile was handsome and quiet. Soon, Jiangzhou realized something was wrong. What's the situation? Qin Mo's dark eyes didn't reveal any emotions. He sat on the sofa lazily and tugged at his tie. What would you think if a boy was too pretty? Jiangzhou was smart. When he heard that, his fingers froze and he turned towards Qin Mo. He had a premonition that what Qin Mo was going to say next would definitely become a secret that only the two of them would know. I want that guy. Qin Mo tilted his head like a vampire noble from the darkness. I really want to. The thing that Jiang Zuo was most worried about had happened, but he couldn't help but ask, "Is that Fujio? Is it that obvious?" Qin Mo lit a cigarette and lit it. The surrounding temperature dropped several degrees because of his words. "But that guy treats me very normally." Jiang Zuo opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. Qin Mo was the only one in the Qin family. Chapter 520. It's different now. Qin Mo exhaled a puff of smoke. Through the clear smoke, Jiang Zuo couldn't understand why he felt a hint of sadness in Qin Mo's eyes. Jiang Zuo took another sip and thought for a moment. It might be an illusion. After all, you haven't been in a relationship and don't frequent these places like me. Sometimes, when you spend too much time with someone, you might feel possessive. It's not just possessive. Qin Mo glanced over at him. When I saw that guy in female clothes, I couldn't help but kiss him. Do you think it's an illusion? Jiang Zuo frowned. Female clothes? Maybe that's the main point. You are interested in girls, that's why you have such a reaction. Qin Mo glanced at the cigarette between his fingers. Is that so? Jiang Zuo nodded. At this moment, Qin Mo suddenly laughed, but there wasn't a hint of warmth in his eyes. Instead, he was like a devil, his voice slow. Do you know what I was thinking when a girl hugged me in the front hall? I was thinking that if that guy came to the nightclub and was seduced like that, those girls should go to hell. With that, he took a puff, his gaze dark. Because he can only be mine. Jiang Zuo watched Qin Mo's expression, his heart thumping. What about him? Compared to me, he dotes on your sister more. They were together the entire day yesterday. What do you think? Qin Mo's voice was calm, so calm that it didn't seem like his usual self. Jiang Zuo, if there's a guy who doesn't care about a girl's looks and figure but is gentle to her, that means he really likes her. Do you understand? From the start, Shui Yaoyao was different to him. Jiang Zuo stood up abruptly. No. Qin Mo glanced up at him. What do you mean no? From the start, I was the one who was nice to the chubby girl. When Jiang Zuo said this, he changed his usual flirtatious demeanor. His peach blossom eyes were filled with indignation. But the moment he finished his sentence, he paused immediately. Qin Mo glanced at him. I see. What? So that's how it is. Jiang Zuo sat back down and smiled lightly. Don't overthink things. I don't have any feelings for that fat chick like you do for Fujio. But I just don't understand. Didn't I treat her well in the past? She missed me, but I didn't let her go. She knew that I didn't want my dad to remarry, but when her mom asked for her opinion, she said she agreed. Qin Mo extinguished the cigarette in his hand. Are you happy that she doesn't miss you now? What right does she have to be unfilial just because she says so? Jiang Zuo narrowed his eyes. Don't worry, it's impossible between her and Fujio. I have a way to deal with her. Qin Mo glanced at him. Regardless of what your plan is, don't hurt anyone. Of course, if you simply want to stop them from being together, I will provide you with all my support. Who do you think I am? Jiang Zuo smiled. Fortunately, I have something that can threaten that fat chick. You can't go back on your word after sleeping with him. Qin Mo raised his eyebrows and didn't continue speaking. In fact, he wasn't worried about Shui Yaoyao. But that fellow didn't care about him at all. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked him to find a girl to try kissing. As long as he thought about this. Chapter 521. A masquerade party changed a lot of things. However, some people didn't notice the change. They didn't even know if it was good or bad. Just like when Qin Mo left, Jiang Zuo said, think about it. Maybe if you don't contact each other for 2 days, everything will be normal. Your circle isn't suitable for this kind of relationship. If you are just the heir of the Qin group, you can ignore everything and no one will pay attention to you. But you still have to compete, right? Qin Mo stood up and put out the cigarette. Help me get a room, I'll sleep here tonight. Jiang Zuo was shocked. Was he going to break the record of not sleeping outside for many years? Do you need me to send a girl? Or a boy to you? Jiang Zuo suggested. Maybe it would be better if they moved. Qin Mo only said one word. Dirty. It seemed like young Master Qin's misophobia still existed. He was relieved. And it was obvious that Qin Mo didn't have any special feelings for a boy. Which meant he hadn't turned gay. It was all because of too much contact. At this point, Jiangsu could only comfort himself and hope that things could change. Some people were destined to have insomnia tonight. Besides Jiangsu, there was another person who knew the secret, Feng Yi. After Qin Mo left, Feng Yi indirectly reminded everyone that everything that happened today was the company's reward for everyone. He hoped that everyone wouldn't share it and just treat it as tonight's secret. But the truth was, leaks were inevitable. Fortunately, someone only said, Almighty Qin kissed the mysterious witch on Tieba. No specific photos were posted. So it didn't cause much of a stir. But as a manager, he had to pay attention to such things. And after Feng Yi found out that the person who was kissed was Fu Jiao, he had to stop this news. In the online circle, he knew very well that water could carry a boat or overturn it. These people were people who only wanted to play well in the competition. They couldn't be hindered by other factors. Even if those factors included the crazy love in the past, and then the incomprehensible fans turning into haters. Maybe it was time to establish a fan club for Spade Z. After daybreak, he would ask Little Spade's opinion. Some things were fine as long as he knew it in his heart. There was no need to point it out. He hoped that the cross-dressing incident would be completely over. Because once someone dug it out, the consequences would be unthinkable. The night outside grew even darker. After taking a shower, Fu Jiao took off her wig and returned to that lazy, dark, and beautiful young man. She stuffed one hand into her trouser pocket and wiped her silver-gray hair with the other. She glanced sideways at the sweater and trousers on the wooden chair. I'll send it to the Almighty tomorrow. This kiss misunderstanding must be cleared up. I hope the Almighty's mom is here. Let's play hero together and liven up the atmosphere. At this thought, Fu Jiao raised her eyes. In the mirror, her thin lips were still red, and they looked like they had been bitten. Today was indeed a dangerous day. If it wasn't for the kiss, the Almighty must have discovered her secret long ago. In fact, there was no collagen tool. Fu Jiao reached out and touched her own softness. Her eyes were deep. Indeed, he should hurry up. The longer he stayed in this place, the more dangerous it would be. Thinking of this, Fu Jiao opened her laptop and did her daily routine, which was to reconstruct the IP database. However, on this day, there was an email in her mailbox. Chapter 522. Fu Jiao's fingers stopped typing. A hacker would always have a lot of emails. And no one would know about her emails. Except for Hoshino. Fu Jiao was now sure that the figure she saw at the regional competition was not only familiar, but it was very likely to be him. She changed her IP address, and the email changed accordingly. Another email. Fu Jiao's eyes flickered, and she logged in with her IP address. Only then did she realize that a third of the emails had such an email. A third of the emails. Nearly 1,000. 1,000. Fu Jiao sat in front of the computer and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, it wasn't time yet. She had to wait for the national competition to end. Fu Jiao looked up at the calendar hanging on the wall. There was still half a month. There was still half a month's time before everything here would end. But everything wouldn't be so peaceful. The night grew darker. Wu Zhan lay on the bed, tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of Qin Mo kissing someone appeared in her mind. Who was that woman? Others didn't understand Qin Mo, but that didn't mean she didn't. She had liked him for so many years. She seemed to be watching his every move. When did that person care about the company's rules? The more she thought about it, the more Wu Zhan felt that something was wrong. Moreover, the feeling of not getting what she wanted made her attribute it to the person who was kissed. Maybe she should investigate the other party's background. Wu Zhan narrowed her eyes, sat up, and dialed her colleague's number. Hello, are you in charge of the security of the hotel in the suburbs of Nanqing district? No, nothing. I attended a party today, and I feel that the security there isn't good, so I want to check the surveillance there. Okay, sure, I'll go with you tomorrow. Wu Zhan was a police officer. It was indeed convenient for her to work in this industry. The next day, She changed into a police uniform and went to the hotel where the masquerade party was held with her colleague. At the end of the year, it was normal for the police to check on such things. Therefore, neither the hotel nor Wu Zhen's colleague felt that there was anything wrong with Wu Zhen's actions. The hotel was very cooperative. Once the manager heard that there was a security issue, he brought them to the surveillance room. However, the security guard in charge of this area was still puzzled. Why were there so many people who wanted to watch yesterday's footage? However, people were born with an instinct to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. Generally, when they saw a policeman in uniform, they would not mention some small things. Hence, they didn't take the initiative to say that young Master Qin had seen the surveillance footage. Wu Zhen wouldn't know either. However, there was one thing that was particularly strange. When they went back to take a look, the surveillance footage from yesterday had all disappeared. What? It's not out yet? Wu Zhen asked from the side. The two security guards looked at each other and said cautiously, "The surveillance seems to be broken." Spoiled? Wu Zhen frowned. How could the surveillance device be spoiled? We're not sure either. The security guard guessed. It should be a problem with the system. Wu Zhen didn't achieve her goal and her face turned cold. You are in this line of work. How can you not know this? The security guard fell silent. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.